Bruchim Abayim, Morai Rabotai. I want to thank Shmuel Dayan that really started this. Took a certain amount of shtadlut to put this together, starting hopefully what will be a series on Shovavim, and we'll divide it in short shiurim. This way it's bite-sized, it's not very elongated, and each shiur will, Bezat Hashem, focus on one aspect. There are many different things that this could be broken to, and as we'll discuss maybe a little bit of it today, but just first and foremost, the source of this starts already from the Mekubalim, already from the time of Adam Arishon. This is like Rambam writes, I think at the end of Perek Chaf Aleph, Rabbi, he writes, there isn't an Avera for all the communities at all times, all of the generations, like staying away from areas of Arayot, issues that are related to Arayot, and this really is the Pasuk, Shuvu Banim Shovavim. This is really play on words, but Shovavim is an acronym, Rashi Tevot, for Shemot, Va'era Bo B'Shalach, and Yitro Mishpatim. And the Shana Me'uberet, you also have Turmat Etzaveh, so it becomes Shovavim Tat. But those 6 to 8 weeks are Mesugal for fixing the areas of transgressions that are related to the Avon HaBrit. Now, it's not necessarily all Avon HaBrit, what we call Shechvat Zera Lebatala or Riyot HaAsurot. As we'll see, it actually segues into other things that are connected with it. Like Kaas and Gava is directly connected, and maybe at some point we'll discuss how it is connected, but these are directly connected to Avon HaBrit as well. Now, historically speaking, this started from the Avon of Adam Arishon, one of the first things that happened. Adam Arishon, after Etz Hadat, and Etz Hadat is connected, the Avon of Etz Hadat is also connected with Avon HaBrit. But after Etz Hadat, he had 130 years of depression. He separated himself from Hava, from his wife, and Zohar HaKadosh writes, all of the Nitzosot HaKdusha that were wasted from him, they went into the Klipot. Those Neshamot, those elements of Kedusha were given to what we call the Chitzonim, the Sitra Achara, the other side, the side of Tum'ah. So Ari HaKadosh explains that these came back in Gilgul in the time of Dor HaMabul, but once you come back, Gilgul is one of the most difficult things because you're taking a chance again. Right? You're taking a chance again. The Gemara says that there was a debate in the Tanaim. Is it good for a person to be born? Is it not good for a person to be born? This was a debated thing for over 2 years. Nimnu vegamru, and the maskana was mutav la'adam shelo nivra. It would be better if a person was not created. V'achshav shenivra, and now that he is created, yefashvesh b'masav, yemashmesh b'masav. It should be working hard to making sure that you don't lose your olam haba via a free will, bechira chofshit that the person has. So they messed up. These neshamot, they, v'tishahed haaretz lifnei Elokim, right? They all had the issue of actually Zera Batala itself, and they were washed away. The Dor HaMabul was destroyed, wiped away by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then they came, says the Ari, they came back in Gilgul in Dor HaPalaga. Again, they had a Bechira Chofshit, and they again missed their opportunity. They messed up, and this time they didn't do it with Arayot, but it was with Merida. They rebelled against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hava nilvena levenim v'nisrefa lisrefa. Let us make bricks and build and go and fight with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And says the Ari, they also were dispersed. That's the Mishnah that says from Adam Arishon until Noah was 10 generations, right? The 10 is the full capacity of the Sfirot that you have. And then they were wiped away. A new beginning, when he emerged from water, just like the world emerged from water in the beginning, was a new creation, the time of Noah, right? It started from Shabbat again, right? Yonah Matzah Bo Manoah came out, and he also got depressed, and he had an issue of Zera Rabatara, however that happened with his grandson and so on. But that became another 10 generations until Avraham Avinu. So the Dor Palaga missed it as well, and says the Ari, they all came back, those Nitzosot and those Neshamot came back in the door of the Galut of Mitzrayim. Hence, says the Ari, Kol haben hayilod hayeora tashlichuhu, that we're going to have in this week's parasha, that they would throw the kids into the Nile, into the Nilos. That was like the Dor HaMabul, right? That they were destroyed with water, and then you had as a tikkun, midah keneged midah, v'haval nilvena levenim v'nisrefa lisrefa, making bricks against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was that hard work that they had to work, that was a tikkun of that as well. So this really has a history of, and you'll say, wow, it's so bad, like what's there already? Now this is, wait until you see what Zohar HaKadosh says. It's pretty depressing actually. You study the Zohar HaKadosh seems to say that this Avera is the only Avera that doesn't have tshuva. So he says, right? If I remember correctly, the Plei Yoetz, Rabbi Eliezer Papa, Alav Shalom, from Turkey, he writes in Plei Yoetz, saw last time back in Iran, it was 7, 8 years ago, but he says, he has a very poetic language in the whole Sefer, and he says, if a person will be born and live 1,000 years twice, you still can't finish fixing the Avera of Chatad Neurim and the area of Shechat Zarbatar. Now that's pretty depressing, right? Now, that does not necessarily mean that you can't do tshuva. Now, Bnei Yissaschar spends a lot of time explaining the concept of tshuva tatat, tshuva ilah. Says, yeah, tshuva tatat does not work for it. Surface tshuva, which is shitchi and not really deep, emerging from a person's heart, real charata and azivat achet, that does not work. But if you have something that really, really means and comes from the heart, that tshuva, nothing could stop. Sometimes it becomes hard. It's a harder tshuva, but nothing, en davar omed bifnei tshuva. We discussed this when we did the Gemara Masechet Chagigat of Tetvav and Tetzayin. Gemara talks about, Elisha ben Avuya, who was the Rebbe of Rabbi Meir, and he heard Shuvu Banim Shovavim, right? Everyone comes back, and again, you see maybe in a deeper sense that is connected with Shovavim, Chutz Me'acher, aside from this guy. And every time Rabbi Meir would say, Avata Hazor Becha, he was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. Rabbi Meir still learned from him, even afterwards. And he would answer him, he would say, Kevar Shamati Ma'chorei HaPargod, I already heard a message from Hashem that I cannot go back. And the Gemara assumes that as a mistake, that there is nobody that can't go back. Achav was Melech Rasha, one of the people who lost his Chelek L'Olam Haba, like the Mishnah says in the beginning of the 11th parak of Sanhedrin, and yet the Pasuk says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told the Navi, Ra'ita ki nichna Achav milfanai. You see, Achav, made himself, started doing teshuvah. He became a little bit anav, a little bit humbled, and because of that, Hashem says, "I'm not going to bring the difficulty in his time." It's a tremendous thing. You have a little hirhur teshuvah, and you could become a tzaddik. Now, the Gemara says that if a person betroths a woman, it's mekadesh, a girl, Al tenai, so it depends. Sometimes it's not kiddushin hadal. If he goes and says harat mekudeshet li al menat shani tzadik gamur, right? And he happens to not be a tzaddik. Is he mekudeshet? If he goes and says harat mekudeshet li al menat shani billionaire, right? And he's not a billionaire, then it's nothing. Shalom ubracha, have a good day. Yes. If he says, al menat, on condition that I have a house in the flats of Beverly Hills, and he doesn't have it, it's not mekudeshet. But if he says al menat shani tzadik gamur, and he is the top of federal jail from a solitary confinement, he is a serial killer, and they dragged him off of his cell, and he said this, Mara says she needs a get. Why does she need a get? Because Shema Hirher Tshuva. Now, this person, can he have done Chatat Neurim? Yeah. Can he have issues in the area of Shmirat Brit? Of course he can. And a Hirhur Tshuva could put him back at the place of Sadiq Gamur if it's meant genuinely and seriously. Now, that does not mean that it's wiped clean. Let me just tell you this concept in a misgeret of a chidush from the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav asks a stira between two Rambams in Perek Aleph, Perek Bet of Hilchot Tshuva and Perek Zayin of Hilchot Tshuva. Rambam in the beginning discusses and spends a lot of time in process of Tshuva. And it says, well, if you really have charata and really want to fix, when you do the tshuva, when you do vidui, and it comes with charata and azivat ached, if it's mitzvat aseh, lo zaz misham ad shemo chalinoto. Before you get to move, you already your slate is wiped clean. If it's mitzvat lo taseh, then it's a process, right? It's not just the tshuva. The tshuva tola. The tshuva makes it hanging. But now you have to still knock it out with a process of Isurim. You have to go through Yom Kippurim first. If it's something that also has karet, so then you have to go through Yom Kippurim. You have to do vidui, tshuva. You have to go through Yom Kippur. You have to also go through Yisurim. And if it involves Chilul Hashem, then until the day that he dies, still is hanging. Right? And yet, Rambam, later on, Hilchot Tshuva says, if a person does proper tshuva, a second ago he was ma'us, he was disgusting to Hashem. He was rachok, he was far. And he was not wanted. And now, this moment he is ahuv, he's beloved, he is close, he has a whole list of poetic languages. Says the Brisker Rav, I don't get it. If you did Hilul Hashem, he's not fixed until much later. And says the Brisker Rav, there are two elements, the tzvei dinim, there are two things in tshuva. One is the relationship that you have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The other thing is the things that you have damaged. Imagine if 3 o'clock in the morning you wake up and you find your best friend has broken into your house, broken the cameras, broken the lock, broken the door, came in, destroyed your safe, and he's in the middle of getting everything that you have. Caught red-handed. What just happened? Well, your relationship with him is out the window. Finished. There's no... it's done. But he also made $10,000 worth of damages. Now, if he wants to do tshuva, he has to restore his relationship with you by asking mechila, and that, which us, the human beings, are going to have a very hard time doing it. But he also has to pay for all the damages, the doors and the cameras and all the things that he broke. He has to fix the broken things. So says the Brisker Rav, by us with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the same thing. There's the relationship that has been damaged, and then there is the actual intangible for us, but the actual real things that you destroyed. You did Chol Shabbat, you destroyed Olamot up there as real consequences in the spiritual world, and that has to be fixed. So says the Brisker Rav, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the chidush is if you are genuine and you do tshuva immediately, that second, even if you had Chilul Hashem and all those things, the most chamur avirot, immediately, that second, your relationship is restored to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as though in his eyes now you are a tzaddik gamur, someone that has never ever done any avirot. But now you have to fix the process of fixing the olamot that you destroyed, that's the process of tshuva that you have to do. So therefore you see from all these Gemarot and the Rambams that regardless of what Avera, and certainly this is included in it, there is tshuva. So when Zohar HaKadosh says that there is no tshuva for this, the meaning of it is that this is a difficult thing to do tshuva from because the damage is just so great. Now why is the damage so great? Because, well, neshama is the greatest creature that there is. Right? Chasarehu me'at me'elohim v'kavod ve'adar te'aterehu. Like the Pasuk says in Tehillim, our neshama is greater creature than the malachim. Right? And therefore, the source of neshama is like a nuclear power. Now, if you give nuclear power to a good country, if you use it properly, you could light up a whole city with nuclear power. You could do amazing things with it. If you put it in the right place, it's good. If you put it in the wrong hands, then it could be the most destructive force in the world. Now imagine $1 billion. You could do a lot with $1 billion, but if you have a foolish president that gives all of it to Iran, so then, oy vavoy, right? It's going to be bad because now you gave it to the terror organization. So imagine you giving the neshama is a nuclear power. It's the greatest power that exists in the world. There is nothing greater than the kedusha and the power of a neshama. Hence, if you do something that's building, the closest thing, the Zohar HaKadosh, you see the leshonot of the Ramban really has a whole piece that talks about the marriage and the chibur of husband and wife, but really Zohar HaKadosh compares the chibur of a husband and wife with you standing in front of Shekhinah davening without any hefsek. So it's just like this cannot have any chatzitza between it, that can't have any chatzitza, and the imagery is a tremendous imagery of kedusha. At the same time, if that neshama goes to Sitra Hara, then you just nuked the world, basically. You gave nuclear power, you gave the greatest power to the side of Chitzonim. So no wonder that this makes it in the languages of Zohar HaKadosh, such scary languages. Does not mean that it doesn't have tshuva, it just means it's very difficult because the damage that you have created is a great damage. That's what it means. Now, therefore, you find many who have different minhagim of tshuva for this in communities starting already from 500 years ago around. You find this already from Lekad Yosher, which is probably the earliest source that I found that talks about Tanit in Shovavim, and the minhag has been already from there in Österreich, and they would do one Tanit a week. They would do Thursdays Tanit, right? That was the minhag of the Kadmonim 500 years ago. They would do every week. So in the Shana Meuberet as such, it would be 8 Tanits, right? And they would have Silichot and Tfilot. But then they became, in many communities, Sheni v'Chamishi. They would do Mondays and Thursdays fast during the course of Shovavim. This the Trumat Hadeshen, Rabbi Yisrael brings this as well. That he himself he writes that he would fast in the days of Shovavim. In many other sources that I put over here. It has been brought also la'alacha Magen Avraham on Shulchan Aruch in the beginning of Siman Tafresh Pei brings this actually minhag that in the days of Shovavim they would fast, and the fast would be like any other Tanit Tzibur, and they would say Slichot in Shacharit in the days of Tanit as well. Right? Now, Al Pi Kabbalah, this is just even not the non-Mekubalim. There's like the Trumat Hadeshen and Lekad Yosher. This is not, well, look, Lekad Yosher really does bring from Mekubalim as well, but this is not necessarily, this is just halachic achronim that talk about the minhagim of different kihilot in the time of Shovavim. Al Pi Kabbalah, this is actually the 6 weeks of Shovavim, of Shemot v'Harav Shalach Mitro Mishpatim, are divided to 6 different areas of tikkun in the general aspect of Shovavim. So the Parashat Shemot is the tikkun habrit. So this is the first week, is the most important for direct tikkun habrit, which is called the tikkun of Shishim Ribo, because of the neshamot of Klal Yisrael. Like the Gemara says, that there were Shishim Ribo, and Chazal mentioned that this was the neshamot that are in the guf. There are Shishim Ribo, there are 600,000 general neshamot, and then you could have sparks of different neshamot and so on. Hence, you have more than 600,000 people. So you could have people walking around with the nitzosot of the same neshamot. Like Arya Kadosh and Shara Gilgulim has a lot to say about this. On the other hand, you could have someone, he counts many of the Tanaim that they had multiple nitzosot of different neshamot in them, up to 6 different neshamot being in one person in aspects of nitzosot. That exists as well. Parashat Vayera becomes a tikkun of nida. Now, tikkun pegam haberit could be what, generally speaking, is used as shvazera lebatala. Now, but it doesn't end there. It could be like Maran Chida writes, when he tries to explain why people have a minhag of Tevilat Ezra, right? Which means Tevilat Ezra is a takana, one of the 10 takanot that Ezra Sofer made, which is mentioned in Baba Kama Daf Pei Bet. There is that the person cannot daven or learn before going to mikveh after having a similar emission. So the people, including many Hasiduts, that every morning they go, without missing, they go before tefillah, they go to tevilah. So where did that start from? So Maran Chida says sometimes a person could be trying to go to bathroom, and a little shechvat zera could be released without anything more than that, and that by itself is a tum'ah of shechvat zera, and therefore hence the minhag of tevilah every single day, even though that you don't know of any tum'ah that may have been brought, right? But then there is a thing of nida, right? If a person has had a michshol with nida, and this is both for married people and non-married people, because, for instance, and according to Sfaradim, this is more chamur actually than the Ashkenazim, because Maran in Siman Kuf Sadi Hey, in Sif Chafi Paskins, like his understanding of the Rambam, that even a person's wife, when she is in nida, even if you're a doctor and you want to take her pulse, that would be yarek val yavor. So that's what Maran Paskins, right? The Shach disagrees with him. He understands the Rambam differently, and the Ramban, generally speaking, in that sugya disagrees with the Rambam anyways. So there is what to be discussed there, but Maran of Shulchan Aruch, both in Beit Yosef and in Shulchan Aruch, Paskins like that, and we're bound to it to a great degree, for the most part. And that becomes something very important as well. If a person was not shomer negia, nowadays, if you're not shomer negia, and you have, you go to a party and you have greetings with someone and you give them a hug, and it could be not even a married person. If it's eshet ish, this is a different story. If it's not eshet ish, still, all of the pnuyot are nidot nowadays, right? So there you have, an avon of nida, again, related, even though that it's not necessarily what we would generally speaking refer to as the avon of tikkun of avon nida. But that's, again, just to show that these things could be very subtle. This is not really subtle, but in the mind of people, at least, it could be very subtle. So what if I shook hand and I gave a greeting hug or whatnot, and these things could be serious, when you explore them, even on a halachic base. Even on a halachic base, when you explore them, there could be serious issues right there. Now, for intellectual honesty, I have to say that every person has to ask in many of these areas. They should ask their Moreh Horah. Every person should have a personal Moreh Horah that they talk to. And especially in this area, to do things on your own without having a discussion with someone that you trust, both their knowledge and their life experience, it's very dangerous, because this is one area that people naturally don't want to talk to anybody, and then they start doing stuff that may not be good and fitting for them. And even these things, you may think that this is a great Avera, and it may not be a great Avera. Like Stipler wrote many letters trying to convince Bachurim that seeing Shechvat Zera Batala in a dream, even on Leil Yom Kippur, is not such a big deal that the Chazal say if you see it, you better be scared for your life, and you probably are not going to make it until next Yom Kippur. And right, this type, it's not talking about Bachurim in Yeshiva, it's talking about someone that's married and someone that's this. I'm saying all of these, even though that is a lot of output of information, it's not to make you more confused than you walked in, but it is to say that there is a lot of confusion, and because this is an area that people do not talk to naturally, don't want to talk to the Rabbi and the Rabbanim and Moreh Horahs, it becomes kind of like Ish Kol HaYashar Be'einav Yaseh. Everyone does what they think is fit for them, and that's not necessarily the best way to go about it. Again, these are serious things, not potentially, but they're real serious stuff. But at the same time, you need to have enough direction and knowledge to know how to go about doing a proper tshuva. So that's Parashat Va'era, is the tikkun of Nida. Bo is tikkun of Goya, right? With a Goya, not everything is mutar. Right? It could be a little bit more kal in certain aspects of nida and so on and so forth. The Maharsha talks about this, whether or not there is isur nida with the goya. He actually speaks about this in at Masechet Megillah Daf Yud Gimel. It talks about when Achashverosh would be married to Esther. Esther would be married to Achashverosh, and she was at the same time married to Mordechai. And Mara says in one de'ah that she was omedet micheko shel Achashverosh, and she would go to Tevilah and would go becheko shel Mordechai. So what exactly that is with Nida with Goyim, the Maharsha actually speaks about it there, or the only sources that I could think of. But nevertheless, there is a serious Isur of Goya as well. And again, we live amongst the Goyim, and this is something, of course, serious. Then Parashat Beshalach is tikkun of Kas, Yitro is Gava, and Mishpatim is Kivud Avayim. Now, you'll ask, what does those three things have to do with Pegama Brit? That's something to yet explore, but that is the structure of the 6 weeks with the focus. But many of the Sfarim, that even those earlier sources, they generalize that this 6 weeks, the period of Shovavim, is Mesugal for Avon Brit. In general, it's Mesugal for all the Averot, but in specific for Pegam HaBrit. Now, according to Arizal, you have to fast, a lot of fasts for every Averah that you do. When it comes to Hotzat Shvat Zera Batala, for instance, Arizal writes that you have to fast 84 tanits. So how do you do 84 tanits? So, okay, the Ben Ish Chai and Kafachayim write what this is already from Ariyah Kadosh, that in Shovavim, in the 6 weeks of Shovavim, if you do every day tanit, right, then you have already 30 days, the 5 days, 6 weeks, have 30 days, and then you do 2 hafsakot, and a hafsakah is 2-day tanit, which would amount to 26, 27, really, each one of them will be 54 plus 30 will be 84, right? So that's how they do it. But really, for a person, for instance, a person that has done or has been involved as a doctor in a termination of a baby, right, without asking proper questions. So that, according to Arizal, you need to fast much, much more than that. You know, you would be fasting Tav Shin Yud Ta'anit. How much is that? That's 710 Ta'anit, right? So, okay, that's a lot of fasting. So this actually brings us to what I want to say afterwards, just for giving this some structure. There are two things that people do. Many people can't fast that many fasts, right? You know, go to Hameliyahu, maybe he's going to be fasting every day, and so on. We should have us in mind as well. But for the rest of us, many people, they try to fast, Yom Chamishi, as we mentioned in the earlier Achronim, that was the minhag, or Sheni v'Chamishi, and then they do pidyon of the rest. Right? They redeem the rest of the fasts, and the Kaf HaChaim writes that these days are actually misugal for pidyon ta'anit much more than, even the pidyon ta'anit is a better time now than it would be in the rest of the year. So that is as far as the Kabbalistic view of this. Many in the more recent generations, the past 200 years, especially the movements of Hasidim, which in general, I'm not sure if people realize this, in general Hasiduts are against fasting. Right? They promote more simcha. That's one of the main teachings of the Maggid of Mezrich and the Baal Shem Tov and all these Talmidim was this fact that fasting is not necessarily the way of Avodat Hashem. You want to focus more on simcha and on limud Torah. So therefore, many of the Hasiduts, they were against the Kabbalistic elements of this Tikkun of Shovavim, and instead they focused on learning Torah and Tanit Tibur. Now it's known that the Vilna Gaon said that Tanit Tibur one day is almost equivalent of 100 Tanits. Now that does not mean on Tisha B'Av you should go Tanit Tibur and go to Kabab. That's nothing. You cannot do that. Of course, when you have to fast, you have to fast. But that just means that Tanit Tibur is very important. Right? So therefore many, like my Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal Rabbi Weinberg's great-great-grandfather, Rabbi Avram Weinberg, the first Slonim Rebbe, he writes, and he was not alone, the Satmarov, the first Satmarov was the same way, that they wrote a person should do 5-hour non-stop learnings every day of Shovavim, and that tikkun of learning is a great, and Tanit Tibur. Those 5 hours you don't eat, you don't drink, you don't talk. Tanit Tibur, 5-hour learning. In the yeshivot themselves of Slonim and Satmar, they actually used to have a 5-hour seder, or not eating, not drinking, not talking, another 5-hour seder, and another 3-hour seder. So a 13-hour subtotal of learning, but this was broken down in that way. So, but this 5-hour learning non-stop, ritzifut, without talking and without eating, that would be something that they would do. And there are many people nowadays even that they do it. They go to sleep a little earlier, they wake up crack of dawn, and they basically have a ritzifut before they go to work. And that's the time that they develop. The Midrash says in Vayikra Rabbi, I believe is in Perek Chaf Aleph, did not get a chance to check it, he writes that Limud Torah is the greatest atonement. Now, we generally speaking refer to Limud Torah as the greatest mitzvah, which it is, right? Talmud Torah keneged kulam. But the Midrash writes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Klal Yisrael that all of the korbanot that Shlomo HaMelech brought, 1,000, 1,000 olot yaleh Shlomo, he would bring 1,000 korbanot at the time, right? So all of the korbanot that Shlomo says that in front of your limud Torah is nothing, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Midrash says, Zot HaTorah, this is darshaning a pasuk, Zot HaTorah la'olah v'la'chatat v'la'shalim, says Zot HaTorah, if you have Torah, la'olah, you don't need olah, la'chatat, you don't need chatat, la'asham, you don't need asham, lo shalam, nothing. Torah itself is the greatest atonement. And Maran Chida writes in more than one place that all of the Ta'anits that Ari HaKadosh says, right, talking about us now, for tikkun averot is only for a person that's not dedicated to serious learning. But a person that's dedicated to serious learning, he doesn't need any of those things. Maran Chida is a serious source because he was not just baki in Kabbalah, but he was very reliable in Kitvei Ariya Kadosh, and he was a friend of Rashash, and so on and so forth. So that's the second element of this. So we have this serious aspect of tikkun of pegama brit that is for sure there. It's not something that we take lightly. It's certainly there as a serious avera that has to be dealt with. If you just leave it, it does not evaporate by itself. You could live a lifetime and have not dealt with this because it's an area that's uncomfortable to deal with, and it stays. And chas v'shalom, it could be a tremendous pegam for a person. But if a person, especially now when we get to actually speak about Marot Asurot, when we speak, we'll have at least one shiur, b'li neder b'ezrat Hashem, on histaklut ba'alacha, just the halachot of what you're allowed to see, what you're not allowed to see, and you'll see that you have up to 4 isurim, deoraita and rabbanan, in everything that you see, every time that you see a thing that you're not allowed to see, you could go through a 1 day of travel or walking and amass numbers that you can't even think of. Like astronomical amount of averot a person could amass just not being careful, and then you have all the klei mashchit of the phones, and even if you don't want to see it, it comes to you if you don't have proper filter and proper usage and so on and so forth. Hashem Rachman Litzlan, Hashem Yirachem. So all of that, if you don't deal with it, it doesn't go away. But dealing with it, and this is the main point that I want to make, dealing with it does not mean that a person is rolling in ice and fasting 84 tanits and he looks like a half-dead person at the end of Shovavim. It's nice if you can fast. If a person is working for someone else, he should ask a question halachically if they're allowed to fast. Not so pashut. If you're a schir yom, if you're working for somebody else and this is going to take away from your focus, if you are a teacher, or you're a yeshiva bacher, a person that learns, and this is going to completely knock you out and not be able to learn, you should ask a question. Not so simple, right? But even if a person is strong and could fast every Thursday or every Monday and Thursday, the realization that the main tikkun for our generation comes from a complete dedication and devotion to learning Torah, and that's based on the Ariya Kadosh himself, on Maran Chida, and the Midrash that we learned. There's much more to be said about that. That's really the main point to realize that by itself is an atonement and a kapara. Be'ezrat Hashem, next week we will focus, which is going to be probably one of the main shiurim, we'll focus on the shitot of the Rishonim, to understand this sugya very, very briefly, but in a very technical and text-based way, how the Rambam understands the Isur of Histaklut Ba'alacha, what you're allowed to look at, what you're not allowed to look at, what is from the Torah, what is the addition from rabbinic sources. It's important to note because we think it's a chumrah, or we think not everything is the Oraita, not everything is the Rabbanan, not everything is a chumrah. And it's important to learn them together from the Rambam and Tosafot and Rabbi Yonah and so on, up to Shulchan Aruch, which Be'ezrat Hashem we will spend some time in the weeks to come. Chazaku Baruch.